Today I will talk to you about the science or the physics of influence. And this is sort of the session agenda. Basically, I'll go over some really high-level, really simple stuff. What does it mean? How does it mean to business? And some little more mechanical, deeper stuff, and then some advanced topic. I will probably not have enough time to go to the social network analysis, but it's a technical detail that probably most of you don't want to know anyway. Anyway, so let's start with influence basics, okay? So what is influence anyway? What do you think? What is influence? Well, if you look at Webster's dictionary, these are kind of the dictionary definitions, right? But there's a few kind of characteristics that you have to kind of pick out from this definition. One is that, well, it has to have effect, right? To have influence, it must have effect. That means you also have to have a target audience. And it doesn't always have to have action. Okay, a lot of people say influence always have to have some actions. Not necessarily. Okay, so next thing is that having an effect is easy, right? But it matters how you do it too, right? Because in the definition from the dictionary, basically it says you can't do it by force. You have to kind of do it by this intangible kind of indirect way, right? So basically, this goes down to four things. Okay, there's no carrot. Okay, no carrot means no money. Okay, you can't pay someone for them to change their mind or take an action. Otherwise, you're just bribing them, right? You're not really influencing them, right? And no stick, that just means no force. Okay, you can't force someone to do something. That's not influence either. That's coercion, right? And you can't annoy them to doing something. You can't frustrate them or spam them into doing something. They have to really want to do it, right? But sometimes when people wanted to do something, it's because they have some misunderstanding, because they were tricked, right? So no trick either, right? You can't trick them into doing something, right? So basically, this is sort of the four: no carrot, no stick, no annoyance, no trick, right? No tricks, right? And the key thing to realize that no money doesn't mean no reward. Okay, you can have reward, but such as like non-monetary reward, like a thank you or things of that sort, but no money, right? And no force also doesn't mean no punishment either, right? You could have some kind of as we talk a lot about like social recognition, right? But apparently social shame is another factor, right? You don't want to do something. It also shapes your behavior, right? All right. So that's at a high level what influence means. So for business, it really just means the ability to change a thought or a behavior, right? And through these four things, right? No carrot, no stick, no annoyance, no trick, right? So non-coercive means no force, right? And then you get a point, right? Those 4 points. All right, so now we know what influence is. What about the influencers? Who are the influencers? Well, being in social media for a while, you probably heard of stories of Kevin Smith, right? Anybody heard of this story, right? I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard of Dave Carroll, that breaks guitar, right? You probably heard of Jeff Jarvis as well, if you've been around long enough. That's kind of you could see that each one of them have their kind of preferred channel influence, right? So Kevin Smith sort of used Twitter, and Dave Carroll used YouTube, and then Jeff Jarvis is on blog, right? So in each one of these cases, I actually recommend you to kind of look them up and read about them and kind of watch the video that Dave Carroll produced. It's actually quite funny and quite entertaining. So in all three cases here, they were mistreated by some company. And due to their influence on social media channels, and they were able to cause some major PR crisis. And in some cases, these PR crises are associated with some pretty significant financial damage, right? So do you think these people are influenced? How many people think they are influencer? Yes, no? Yes, no? Sort of, right? Well, they are sort of. They're not really the influencer. Because why? Because influencers are not celebrities. And the reason is because influence is not popularity, right? These people are extremely popular, so they, by being popular, they have influence, right? But just because you're popular doesn't mean you're automatically influential. Right? If you're not popular, probably you're not very influential, right? But being popular doesn't mean automatically qualify you to be an influencer, right? So So there are actually a lot of like confounding factors when people are trying to find influencers. And a couple of these things that I would talk about are, in fact, if you look at, if you define influencer as someone who can influence someone, then anyone can be influencer, right? Think about it. Who has influenced other people, whether it's big things or small things in their life. I'm sure every one of you will raise your hand, right? I mean, so everyone can be influencer. Moreover, like if you're trying to segment influencers, they don't fall into any standard demographic or any kind of technographic, any kind of standard segmentation, right? So an influencer can be your grandma, could be your kids, can be male or female, could be your neighbor, could be anybody, right? Pretty much, like I said, anyone can be influencer. What's more interesting is like, there's no such thing as universal influencer, right? There's no one who could just say, this thing is great, buy it, and then the whole world will go adopt it, that thing, right? Such person don't exist, right? I mean, unless it's God, right? So, right? All right, so now we know what influencers are not, but who are they, right? So they are basically the super fans in your community. They're your product experts. They probably know your product more than you do. They're such a huge fan of your product that they probably use every single version of it that ever existed. So they're your experts, right? They're product experts. And they are your advocates who will speak on your behalf. And they are also evangelists who will defend your brand. Okay? So these are the influencers. So influencer for a marketer's, from a marketer's perspective, is really people who have significant greater ability to influence, right? And influence, as we already defined, is the ability to cause a change in thought or behavior, right? Either something that you thought, or your sentiment, or your opinion about a product, or your behavior. Behavior could be a purchase or referral, okay? And under these four conditions, right? No carrot, no stick, no noise, no tricks, all right? Okay. Now, what does all this mean to your business? You're saying, that's great, but what does this mean, right? Well, being in business, you probably all know the purchase funnel, right? The purchase funnel is actually kind of fueled and fueled by the mass kind of consumers out there, right? Think about this. Anytime you move a consumer down that funnel, you change their thought, right? If you are able to change a consumer who's not aware of your product to being aware of your product, you change their thought, right? You change their mind, right? Or if they're not interested and now all of a sudden they become interested, desire your product, you change your mind, right? So that's influence, right? And finally, if you change their mind so much that they are actually willing to take a purchase, take an action to purchase, right? Then you change your action as well. So the influence is really changing people's mind or behavior, right? So this is this purchase funnel is we call the IDA, awareness, interest, desire, and action. Action here being the purchase, right? But it could be anything else. It could be a referral, could be other things, right? So so this is sort of the spectrum of positive influence, right? Where for your brand, right? And these people, who's going to help you create these positive influence? These are essentially your super users, your brand advocates, right? Your super fans and evangelists. And where they come from? They come from your customer base, people who are already your customer, who's already went through that funnel and take the action to purchase and become your customer. And then if you further engage them and empower them, they become your influencer. Okay? Make sense? All right. Now, this picture all looks great, right? But you're not the only brands out there. Right? There are other brands out there, and they have their funnel too, and they also have their influencer, right? That will kind of bring people down their funnel, and those people will be seen as detractor for your brand, right? So these are kind of the negative influencers out there, right? Okay, so this is sort of the picture of influence that you want to have in mind, but from marketing perspective, right? And in reality, influencers can also like help you cut support costs by helping people help each other, influencing people to help each other. So a really good, powerful influencer could actually influence other people in such a way that it actually take people out of other people's funnel into your funnel, right? Suppose I'm a user, just imagine this, if I'm a user for, I don't know, some particular brand, right? And if some people said, that brand sucks, I'll show you this. And then all of a sudden I switch over, right? Then I all of a sudden move out of another funnel into the funnel of another brand, right? So really powerful influencer could really help you do amazing things. Now, this is the part that I talk about. The superfan could also help you, help influence people in a self-support way. Okay, so people can actually start helping each other. All right, so that's sort of the basic, right? And so the next thing we want to discuss is some of the more mechanical stuff. So do influence matter? If it matters, how much, right? So what do you think? Do influencers actually matter? Anybody take a guess? They probably do, right? But there's actually a lot of debates out there, right? Because a lot of people say, I have identified influencers out there and I can't repeat the program, it doesn't work, right? Why doesn't it work? So this actually comes down to a debate between Malcolm Gladwell, he's a bestseller author. He wrote The Tipping Point, right? And a sociologist who, Duncan Watts, is actually a physicist turned sociologist, kind of like my background. So Malcolm Gladwell basically say influencers matter a great deal because anything they say or anything they do, thousands of people will hear them and potentially a million will follow, right? But then Duncan Watts did a really interesting study. He actually have a social network and he seeded this social network with messages, okay? And then he watched those messages propagate and he did a control case where he just see randomly, and he did another case, experimental case where he see this message to the influencers within the social network, right? And guess what? In two cases, they both eventually reach the same amount of people. Curious, isn't it? Who do you think is right? Do you trust a bestseller author or do you trust a physicist? Right? Well, it turns out both of them are right, okay? Turns out like a lot of people actually misunderstood Duncan Watts' experiment, okay? It is true that if you see a random Joe Schmo in the community, that message will eventually reach the same amount of people if you see the influencer, but it may take him a lot longer, okay? So it's the speed that matters. If you see the message to an influencer, he may reach 1 million people in like, I don't know, a week, okay? But if you see it to any random Joe Schmo, it may take him like half a year or even longer. Make sense? So the effect of influencers is not the number of target they can reach. It's the speed at which they reach the target, right? Because eventually, if you wait long enough, they all reach the same number of people, right? So number of target, the reach is actually a really bad way to measure influence. So what's a better way? A better way would be, speed is probably a better way, but what does it actually mean to your business, right? So a better way would be kind of, had to have some monetary value to it, some value of this influence, right? So I did this study with some professors at MIT, NYU, and Wharton, and we did a study where we're trying to quantify how does word of mouth, essentially the medium over which influence propagate, get turned into money, okay? So we actually did a customer lifetime value model based on real network structures of 12 social graph, 6 of them from lithium. And some of the model parameter that I'd like to point out is that so it takes into account of the network referral value. Okay, this is what Dr. V. Kumar have mentioned, this referral value, right? Even though if you did not purchase anything, right, from the company, your customer lifetime value is not 0, right? Because you could refer like 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people to purchase the product, right? So that's what we call referral value. And also because customer lifetime can actually be very, very long, right? It could be 10, 20 years, right? And this has an implication because the value of money gets discounted over time, right? $1 right now is very different than $1 10 years ago, right? The purchase power, right? And $1 right now is very different from the purchase power that 10 years later, right? So you have to take all that into account. So all that is, once we take all that into account into the model, we also simulated some parameters. These are kind of parameter of simulation. We have a control case where we do random seeding versus influencer, and we also have a case where we can compare the seeding of seeding in the case of a brand monopoly, where you are the only one who had the influencers program, versus if there are other competing brands also around, okay? And we also test this program size. So the result is all in this kind of chart right here, okay? So the result number one that I want to carry out and explain is that there's actually 2 different mechanisms to create value from word of mouth. First is the acquisition of new customer, okay? So these are customers who would never bought your product if they didn't hear the word of mouth from their friends, okay? But because of word of mouth, they buy your product. That's why you gain value, right? You get revenue. And the other one is acceleration of adoption. Okay, this is also called time to market, right? So these people would have bought your product anyway, but because of word of mouth, they buy your product earlier, right? And remember, if they buy your product earlier, it's more profitable because money is discounted, right, over time, right? So if you're in finance, you would know this. So these are two mechanisms that word of mouth can bring value to the company. And the other thing, result number 2 that I want to talk about is that if you compare the case where the influencers versus random, both top and bottom, okay? Influencer seeding increases gain by about 49%, almost 50%. There's a huge gain. Okay, that means if you just randomly seed a message to any Joe Schmo, you will have some gain, right? Because it's better than nothing. But if you seed into those influencers, your gain is about 50% more. Okay, it's even greater gain. Okay, makes sense? All right. So next one, what I will compare is the top part of the graph, this diagram, and the lower part. Basically brand. When you have a competing brand and versus you're a brand monopoly, right? So basically, there's a first huge mover advantage, right? And the advantage is so big, it's actually like 7.5 times, right? So if you are the only one out there with the word of mouth program engaging influencers, be proud of it. You're going to make a lot of money, okay? And if there are a lot of competing brands, then your gain is much less, okay? So you want to be the first. You want to be alone. You want to be the only one, right? So let's understand why that is the case, okay? Because remember this picture that I showed you, right? I said that like if you have a really powerful influencers, right, they can steal customers from your competitor's brand, right, from their funnel, right? But guess what? They have influencers too. They can steal from you just like you do, right? Yeah. So it's just turn the table around, you get the same situation, right? So. But the problem is that if you're the only brand who have this influencer program, then basically, they don't have those influencers there, right? That means, that there's no mechanism for them to steal customer from you. So you have extra mechanism to bring value is by acquisition of customers. That's why when you look back to this picture right here, when there's competing brands, that the only mechanism is acceleration, right? When you have brand monopoly, you can have acceleration and you also have acquisition. Make sense? Okay, so that's a very important point. So now, so clearly influencers are very important, right? But now how do we actually find them? Right? Finding the influencer, actually this is, my top part of the screen is being cut off. Anybody know how to fix that? Or yeah. Okay, but anyway, yeah. So let me go on. So influence is actually a concept involving two parties, right? You have to have the influencer, and you also have the target who you're trying to influence. And one of the key things that we discovered from analyzing 10 years of data from Lithium is that there's actually 6 factors that's very, very important. Okay, first one is credibility, domain credibility. Remember, there's no such thing as universal influencer, right? So an influencer can only influence within a domain that is credible, right? If I'm not credible, I can't influence you. If I'm not credible, you wouldn't be here listening to me, right? So the other one is, the second factor is called high bandwidth, okay? Bandwidth is what a lot of the industry out there are focusing on. Basically, bandwidth, it just means your ability to transmit your expertise on a particular social media channel, right? These data are very easy to get. That's why a lot of people focus on these. A lot of kind of influence measurement vendors out there, what they're actually doing is measuring bandwidth, right? Okay, and I'm going to talk about bandwidth a little bit later, so bear with me until they fix the screen. So anyway, and then the third factor is relevance, right? Whatever my expertise is, better matches what you want, right? If you are trying to buy a camera, right? And I'm a car expert, there's no way I'm going to influence you, right? It's not relevant. It's not relevant to you, right? Okay, and then fourth factor, timing, right? Timing is important because every user, every person, every consumer have a window, have a decision journey, right? And within that, throughout that decision journey, there's a short window of time where they is susceptible to influence, right? So for example, if I'm trying to buy a laptop, right, that window is probably about a month. I may kind of look around for a month, right? And after I buy the laptop, then it's too late, right? You can't tell me to buy another one after that, right? If you're trying to buy a car, it's probably a few months, maybe half a year. If you're trying to buy a house, maybe a year, right? That decision window is different for different product and services. And finally, this is the fifth factor is channel alignment. Channel alignment just means that your influencer and your target better be in the same place, right? If you're trying to influence people on Twitter, it doesn't help you to find an influencer on Facebook. Doesn't help you, right? If you're trying to run a campaign in New York, it doesn't help you at all to find an influencer in LA. It's not going to have any effect, okay? So, and finally is the last factor, sixth factor, is confidence, right? It's how much, this is one of the, it would be great if you could fix this thing, because people can't see this on the bottom. On the bottom, basically says target, from the influencer to the target, okay? So confidence is what people in the industry call trust, okay? Regardless whether you have credibility or bandwidth or not, right? If your target doesn't trust you, you can't influence them either, right? So regardless whether I have credibility or not, if you don't trust me, then I'm out of luck. I have no chance of influencing you, okay? Make sense? All right, so one of the curious things about this model is that, you have to have all 6 factors, right? When you have any one of the factors missing, then you break the chain, okay? You break that chain. Just imagine, just think that, run it through your mind, right? If you have all the other 5 and just missing one of them, right? Will you actually be influenced? Probably not, right? And if it's at the wrong time or the wrong channel, basically the influencer's influence just doesn't propagate to you. It doesn't get to you if you break the chain. Okay, so you have to really have all 6, right? So people out there who's focusing on the bandwidth, they don't have all 6 factors. They're actually not finding influencers. Okay, so all right. Now, how do we find potential influencers? Let's look at some of the data that we could use. So to find the high bandwidth user, right? So there's several kinds of data that we could use. One is kind of we call the participation velocity data. So these are the rate at which people participate, right? It's how many times I tweet a day. It's essentially a rate, okay? How frequently do I share? How frequent do I write blogs? So these are kind of the velocity, right, of data. It's something that's amount of activity divided by a time, okay? And then the other type of data that we could use to gauge whether people have enough bandwidth is their social equity, right? Social equity just means that it's something is opposite to the velocity. It's something that you accumulate over time. Okay. For example, like total number of friends you have, total number of followers you have, total number of blogs you have written, right? All those are things you accumulate over time throughout a long history of time. That's why they call social equity, right? And social graph actually can combine both of these, and I will talk about that in a later example. So I'll skip that for now. Now, how do you actually find credible users? Well, credible users, you can actually use social graph, but you can also use self-proclaimed data, such as in LinkedIn, right? If somebody said, I've been in the car business for like 20 years in designing cars or whatever, and he's probably credible, right? And reputation, another mechanism, right? Whether you have achieved something. You have done something great and people recognize you, reputation data is another way to get credible users. The last one is actually very important. It's the one that we actually use is reciprocity data. It's what other people said about you. Okay, if you did something in any community and people say, I like it, I give you a kudo, right? If a lot of people say that about you, then you probably are credible in that domain, right? Okay, so reciprocity data. So the intersection of these two sets is the potential influencer, right? They're not the influencer yet because so far I've only considered 2 factors out of the 6, right? Now, but they're the potential influencer, right? So now let's take a look at social graph data and see how we use social graph data to find the real influencer. So let's look at the effect of relevance and timing, okay? Now, imagine this is a social graph on Facebook, okay? Each dot there is a person, a user, okay? And each one of the lines there represents a friendship. So if you are a brand manager or marketer and say like Apple, and you're trying to find the influencer, who do you think the influencer would be? I've actually make the dot size proportional to the number of people they connected to. Okay? So it makes it really easy. Most of you probably would think that it's this guy, right? Anybody would object? Anybody would object? Yes, no? Yeah. You would? Okay, good. Okay. So now, most people would probably think it's Pop Guy is an influencer, right? But the thing is that we actually have the conversation data, right? What they actually talk about. So I'm going to color all the friends that they actually talk about Apple iPhone 4 with. Okay, so right now, who do you think the influencer is? Who do you think is the influencer? Probably Fangirl or WizKid, right? Right? So the fact that Pop Guy has a lot of friends is irrelevant to you if he didn't talk about your brand or your service. Okay? Make sense? All right. But we also have other data. We have the timestamp of every conversation that went on, right? That means I could actually color these, kind of color code this conversation or this relationship with a lighter shade of red when they're further back in time, right? And if I do that, guess what? Hey, Fangirl, she was an influencer, but that's 6 months ago, okay? Not anymore, okay? So people that you want are people like WizKid, okay? And so this is actually a very simple social graph. So on the Facebook, this graph would be so dense you probably couldn't see all the details. But there will be many, many people like WizKid here, okay, who actually had the bandwidth, talk about your brand, and had the relevant relationship and have the right timing, right, which is now, okay? So, all right, so that's the effect of timing and relevance. Everybody got that? Okay, good, no questions. All right, so the way to think about this is really a intelligence filtering, okay? Intelligent filtering. Basically, you said that, well, anybody who kind of didn't break one of those factors in the chain, I could just filter them out, right? So the easiest one to filter out is probably channel, right? If you're in the wrong channel, I don't even have to worry about you. If I'm trying to influence people on Facebook, I could ignore the other channel, right? Because they're not on Facebook. I don't have to worry about it, right? And if they are talk about stuff that's not relevant to you, you don't have to worry about them either, right? And if they are talking about the right time, right? So the time is usually, like I said, right now, right? So it's actually how far back do you look? Do you look? How big is that window that you have to look in order to determine whether they have relevance or not? So if they're out of that window, they talk about stuff, but they talk about the right stuff, but they talk about it kind of beyond that window of relevance, then they're not relevant to you, right? You could filter them out, right? And if they don't have enough bandwidth, you could remove them either, okay? Also, and finally, if they don't have the credibility, you could just chop them off as well. And finally, you're left with a few people, right? And there is where trust comes in. How do you determine trust, right? People trust people who are kind of close to them or similar to them on the social graph, right? So you could use the distance on the social graph or how similar they are, their interests with them, to determine this trust level, okay? And the people who win that on the top of that list will be your influencers, okay? All right. So that's how we find influencers in our Lithium platform. So now I'm going to go into a little more the deeper stuff, the more advanced topic. All right, so now we have the influencer, so what? What's next? What can you do with them? Right? There's something you probably shouldn't do, right? You probably shouldn't pay them, right? Remember, no money, no carrot, right? Or you probably shouldn't blatantly promote them either, right? Because they kind of, once people, suppose I tell my friends about like, I love Coke, right? And then my friends find out that, hey, you get paid from Coke. What are they going to do? What do you think they would do? They'll probably ignore every email that I send about Coke, or even every like real email that that I send them. They'll probably put a spam filter on it and treat me like a spam, right? So they will lose credibility, right? If they find out that you pay them or to blatantly promote them. And you probably should not work them like employees either, because they will really hate you and they will turn against you, right? So how do you actually influence the influencers, right? And remember, you can't use carrot, you can't use stick, you can't use frustration, right, or annoyance, and you can't trick them either. So how do you actually work with them? This is very limited, right? It feels like there's no way, right? So how do you actually work with them without actually working with them? Well, you could just say, well, okay, if they're so limited, then why don't I just leave them be and let them do the word of mouth trick, okay? And if you do that, that will work, but it doesn't work too well. Basically, the picture looks like this, okay? You have your marketing blast, right? And a few people are really passionate about your product. They convert, and they become your influencer, right? But what happens is that, well, what happens is word of mouth, right? Yeah, there's word of mouth, but basically it looks kind of like this. Okay, what happened? Basically, uncoordinated word of mouth had really low efficacy, and word of mouth doesn't propagate very far. So what's wrong with that picture that you just saw? What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture is that the passionate influencers are actually too far apart, right? And the word of mouth actually decays to almost nothing before they reach another person who will pass it on. Okay? In order for word of mouth to propagate, you have to reach another person that will pass it on before it decays to nothing, right? And over time, if that happens over time, then even the people who are truly passionate, over time they lose their passion and enthusiasm as well, right? And then that's the end of it, right? Okay. So the problem is really distance and time. So how do we fix that? Well, the key is just to shorten that distance and time between people, right? Between these influencers, right? And there's actually several ways to do that. And you could do this by in real life event and meet up like this, like people who are passionate about community and technology gathering here, right? We get all kind of in this real life interaction here, but that's rather expensive, right? We can't throw this kind of an event every month a year. It's kind of expensive, right? A more economical way of doing it is through a community, an online community, right? So let's take a look at what happens in the community. Okay, so community word of mouth is actually very effective, and it can overcome that decaying effect of distance and time. And the reason they could do that is because they have a high concentration of these passionate users. Okay, remember the key is actually concentration. It's not many. Okay, many is not enough. You have to have many of them close to each other. It's a concentration that matters. Okay, so that's why community works, because you actually take all these people, right, and then you concentrate them in one community, right? So the result is that you get ongoing conversation. If you are together with another person who is passionate about beauty, right, then they're going to go on forever, right? And one of the nice things about community content is that they're persistent, right? They stick there forever. Unlike Facebook, it kind of goes down the wall and then disappear, and then you can never get them back, right? And then in the community, you kind of have a conversation with people, right? By having this conversation, you actually evolve the conversation to explore different use cases. And then the conversation could take you to use cases that you normally wouldn't think of, right? This is kind of where ideation and innovation occur. And all of these things actually leads to kind of ongoing conversation, actually lead to more enthusiasm, right? And persistent message actually prolong the lifetime, right? And then because your ideation and innovation actually increase the relevance to people who are kind of in the edge case and increase relevance and adoption. And guess what? All these things kind of feedback and drive even more conversation, more content, and more ideation. Okay? You can see this is a feedback loop, right? Positive feedback loop. And what happens in a positive feedback loop? You get avalanche, right? So the picture really looks like this, okay? You put these people, same 4 people in the community, right? And let's kind of watch over again what happened. Is that you could do your same old marketing blast, right? So this picture, right, and the same 4 people get converted, right? And now, when they talk, the other people hear them, right? And the conversation goes on much, much longer, right? Because it goes on much longer, more people will hear them, so more people get converted, and we get more conversation, and this turns into avalanche. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So what is that repeatable strategy? I mean, you can't, remember, no carrot, no stick, no annoyance, no trick, right? So the repeatable strategy is actually to co-create value with them within a community, right? So community, actually provides an audience for these influencers, right? If you guys are not here, I'm not going to talk. I'm going to pack my backpack and just go home, right? It provides an audience, and it amplifies their influence. And moreover, it actually cultivates this influencer. It allows ordinary customers, ordinary people to gain status and recognition through their participation and build their influence within the community. Okay? And so the community provides all these things for the influencer, right? But community members And sponsors also benefit, right? Community members certainly benefit from this influencer's expertise, right? And the sponsor get effective word of mouth and cutting support costs, right? So this is a win-win and win strategy for everyone. See that? Okay. All right. So I said that in the community, you actually cultivate influencer, right? Let's see how that happens. This is actually a real data from our client, a real social graph from our client. I'm not going to tell you who. So each dot right here represents one person, and each one of the edge represents there's a communication. Okay, it actually talked to someone. Okay, now, and the size of the dot represents how many people they talk to. So the bigger the dot, the more people they talk to. Okay, and the color of the dot is actually the influence. The more yellow they are, the more influential they are. The more red they are, the less influential. Okay, so let's watch this graph evolve in the community. Okay, so as you can see, people kind of keep joining, right? People join the community, and kind of you have people kind of change their influence, and more people some people talk to more people, right? And I want to pay attention to the little tiny dot there. It's so tiny that you probably cannot see that dot right now. Okay, let me tell you, it's a tiny red dot, very very tiny red dot. That means tiny means that guy didn't talk to a lot of people, right? It's a red dot means it's not very influential yet. Okay. Now watch him over the next few weeks, okay? Pay attention. Now, he's gotten bigger and he's changed color, right? He's changed color to orange now. If you watch him over the next few more weeks, he's gotten bigger and become a yellow dot. He's almost become the most influential person in the community, right? Now, one thing I want to stress again is that influence is not the same as connection, right? So this guy right here, it's a big red dot. He actually is connected to more people. He talks to more people than the yellow dot that we just see, right? But remember, this is the red dot, right? That means, and the scale of influence is actually not very influential. Okay? All right. All right. So we could watch this community grow again, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And so in the word of mouth, in the community, you could say, well, this sort of is kind of confined in the community, right? And that's true, but this picture has, didn't consider the fact that, each one of these influencers, they have their followers, right? They have their followers. They have friends and family who may not even be online. They have grandmother who's not even using the computer, right? But as long as there's content, interesting content that they could take from the community that they could share into their social network, right? Then this information will propagate beyond the community, right? So even though community is actually a very great way to kind of start to see your word of mouth message, it's not where it's going to end, because community will actually act like a little kind of amplifier, right? It takes these messages and within the community interact with these influencers and amplify that message, and they amplify them outward beyond the community, right? So even though, like I said, community is actually a great way to see the word of mouth, your influence is actually going to go way beyond the community. Okay, so let's review a little bit of summary here. So the first part, basically, I'll talk about some definition, right? Influence is the ability to change people's thought or behavior, right? Under no carrot, no stick, no trick, right? And influencers are not celebrity, okay? Because influence is not popularity, right? And influence can help you several ways, right? It can help you drive effective word of mouth and marketing, right? Because they could actually help you move this customer down the purchase funnel, right? And increase sales. And it can actually help you acquire customer from your competitor, right? Finally, it can actually help you cut costs, right? So that's the first part. Second part, the effect and the value of word of mouth is that, the velocity of propagation is a much better measure of influence than total reach. Because if you wait long enough, everybody reaches 10 people, right? I mean, it's kind of, if human never dies, okay, if human live forever, right, then eventually everybody knows everything, right? The fact that it doesn't in the real world is that actually we live only about 100 years and then we die, right? So it doesn't have the chance to kind of propagate that. So targeting the influencer actually increase your gain by 50%, right? And then if you're the first mover, if you're the only person doing that, your gain is like 7.5 times greater, okay? So be the only one, right? Be the first one and be the only one. And how do you find influencers? We talk about the 6 factors, right? Credibility, bandwidth, content relevance, timing, channel alignment, and trust, right? You have to have all 6, right? If you're missing any one or any more than one, then you won't get the right influencers, right? And most influencer programs fail because they're either not repeatable or they didn't get the right influencer, right? So so the last part, okay, this is the last part of the talk, is basically if you have uncoordinated word of mouth, the word of mouth actually doesn't work very well, okay? And community is actually a very good way to overcome that decaying effect of time and space, okay? And value co-creation is probably the most effective strategy, long-term strategy that I've seen in working with influencers. Okay, any questions? That's it. Yep.
So when you said no money doesn't mean no reward, a reward could be a product, something.
Sorry?
A product, a certificate. So what kind of reward exactly?
Yeah, I see. So so actually, GiveGaff is an interesting case study for me because our best practice has been, don't give them money, right? And GiveGaff actually comes along. They say, we're going to give them money, right? We're going to give them like credits to their minutes offline. That's a financial reward, right? And it worked. And one of the key, so I analyzed this problem a little bit and trying to understand it. It comes down to transferability of this value, okay? The minutes that's applied to that person only, right? I can't transfer that to another person. So money is actually not a bad reward because it's money. It's because money is universally transferable. I could take that money and give it to someone else, right? So actually a very interesting case study conducted by Stephen Levitz. Anybody read Freakonomics? Right, Freakonomics, right? Stephen Levitz, the author of Freakonomics. He actually studied a situation for blood donors. And he did two cases. One case where he said, what would happen if I reward those blood donors with $10 cash? Okay? And then the other case is the control condition where he doesn't have any monetary reward. And the result of this experiment was terrible. It turns out that the people who go there to donate blood are not really doesn't really want to donate blood. They're there for the money, right? And so they usually are very low income, or they're sick, they're drug addicts, so their blood is actually not usable. Okay? And yeah, and moreover, the people who want to donate blood don't go donate blood anymore because they say, hey, my blood is not worth $10. It's not even worth my time going to the donation booth. So the people who want to donate blood don't go there. The people who are not there to donate blood actually go there to donate blood. And this actually could lead, the same kind of situation can happen in the community, right? You could think about this. If you reward people with money, right, the people who want to help won't go there because it's not worth their time, right? And the people who actually go there to help are not really there to help. They're there for the money. So what will happen to the people who's being helped? What will happen to you? How will you feel if you are being helped by a person who really don't want to help you? You get really, really bad customer experience, right? You say, well, after you ask them a couple of questions, they say, you still don't get it? What are you, stupid? Right? Go away, right? So that's the kind of experience you're going to get, right? If you're helped by someone who's not there to help you, right? So the key is, non-transferability. So a little kind of perk, most of the value is due to recognition, right? A little bit of a certificate to say thanks. The most of the value is still in the recognition of, it's still non-monetary. That value, the certificate, is actually a very small part of that value that you get. Does that make sense? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. One question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you share more about the tool that you showed, the really cool one about the influencers and identifying upcoming ones? So how do you was it a topic that you picked up to say, this person has more connections, but this person is not an influencer and the other one is because they
know more
about something?
Yeah, we actually built that graph based on the 6 factors that I talk about, right? So if I'm connected to you on Facebook, right, then that doesn't mean I'll connect to you in terms of influence, right? I may not have the high bandwidth. I may not talk about the stuff that the brand cares about. I may not talk about it in the right time, or you may not trust me, or we may not on the right channel, right? So all that, if I'm not on that, if I don't have all that 6 factors, then I'm not connected to you, right? So I built that graph based on those 6 factors, and based on those 6 factors, we compute network metrics to color the dots and the size.
So is that tool now available in your tool?
It was in beta mode, but then I believe it's turned off now. We're trying to make it a little more interactive, a little more user friendly. Yeah. I think I'm out of time. So if you want to talk to me, please just come up, and I'm happy to answer any question you have. But thank you for your attention. Yeah.